Hi, Grandma here, and I'm reading Adam of the Road. And the previous chapter, Adam has been up with his father, which is really cool, and found out that his father is now with the Delisle family and traveling with them, and they are soon going to London. Adam is really excited to join his dad, but he's going to miss his friend, Perkin. And we begin with this next chapter 4, which is called The Road. And I'll show you the picture. And the picture shows Adam with his harp, his dog, and a young woman. The Road. Adam was too excited to sleep much that night. He heard the monks singing matins in the church at midnight, and later a rooster crowing. He saw the first gray light of dawn streak the bits of sky that showed through the pointed windows. He was up before the other boys in the dormitory stirred and ran, shivering in the early chill, to the big stone basin in the lavabo to wash. He had new clothes from the skin out, which his father had brought him from France. He put them on carefully in the dark, the breeches, the long hose, and pointed shoes. The sleeved undergarment called a corte, and over that a sleeveless surcoat exactly like Roger's, made of fine silk material called ray. It was blue and green and tawny stripes going around him, and the hem was cut with points that fluttered around his knees when he moved. He felt very proud in it, and wished that he had a looking glass like a fine lady's to see himself. On his head, over his cap, he wore a green hood with a little cape over his shoulders. The room was getting lighter now, and the sleeping boys around him were stirring a little. He turned all the things out of his wallet and counted them over. 2 silver pennies, the case containing his knife of Sheffield steel, his silver spoon, his comb, and some comfits that Roger had given him wrapped in a piece of cloth. Now, comfit is a candy-coated, could be nuts, it could be fruit. So it's a little bit like a peanut M&M, it's candy-coated. But it could be, an almond, it could be a piece of dried apple or fig, but it is coated in a sugar-like casing, which is colorful. So he bit off the end of one and found it sweet and spicy. He selected half of them, the pink, the green, the brown, and creamy one for Perkin, and laid them on his shelf. Then he fastened the wallet and hung it in his belt. He folded his woolen coverlet into a square and tied it up in his other cot and breeches. The drab homespun surcoat, which his father had said he wouldn't give a pulled hen for, Adam decided to leave behind, to be passed on to some other boy who needed it. He took his harp down from the shelf and hung it over his shoulder. For some time, birds here and there had been giving little chirps and chuckles. Now they seemed all burst into a joyful sound together. Clear, pale light washed into the long room, and colors began to show. A green branch outside one window, the rose and blue designs painted on the walls, the bright orange coverlet on his bed. Perkin rolled over, sat up, and blinked. "If you ever get to Ewelme in Oxfordshire," he said, "my father is a ploughman there. His name is Watt, and he lives near the church. My mother makes the best kidney pie you ever ate." He paused to yawn and rub his eyes. "If you see the parson, tell him I'm studying hard. He arranged for me to come here." "I might get back here before I go to Ewell," said Adam. "Roger said Sir Edmund has a great many manners, and he's always moving about from one to another." A bell clanged with a hearty, cheerful sound, and at once the dormitory was full of arms and legs, and 20 boys jumped or rolled or were dragged out of bed. "My faith," said Perkin, "I'd better hurry." That was all the goodbye they had. With the bell, the day began. It swept them swiftly along and apart. For the last time, Adam went with the other boys to the Abbey church for the service called Prime. After it was over, Adam went to look for his father in the great stable. He found Bayard saddled and bridled, and Roger repacking the portmanteau that he had carried strapped behind him in his saddle. "Run and get your things," he said, and when he saw Adam, "I'll put them in this." Adam ran and was soon back. He didn't want to miss a minute of this huge, dim stable, which was full of the warm smell of horses and rich sounds of whinnyings and neighings and jingling of harnesses and the voices of the Delisle servants. Here and there a shaft of sunlight came through a slit in the wall, and motes danced in so thickly that it looked like golden rain. "Now," said Roger, fastening the last strap, "let's see if this will do. Up you go." He'd fastened the bag with all their possessions in it behind the saddle and covered it with Adam's folded blanket. Adam put his foot in his father's hand and swung up into the improvised seat. Bayard's back was broad and high. Adam felt as if he were on top of the world. The bag was comfortable to ride on, and he could hold on to Roger or the high back of the saddle to steady himself. "I can carry Nick if he gets tired of running, can't I?" he asked a little anxiously. "Well, we'll see. Shall I go get Nick now?" Nick was pretty good at heeling, but Adam had always kept him on a leash in a crowd. Would he know to follow Bayard? Adam wanted to explain the new way of traveling to him. "Cut along, wait for me beside the road in front of Dame Malkin's." Adam slid down and dashed out into the sunshine again. In front of the abbot's palace, the carriage was standing, bright with its gay colors. Adam could not resist the temptation to go over and look at it. The door at the back stood open, and nobody was about except two men who were busy with the horses and did not seem to be noticing him. He climbed up and peered in through the door. He had time only for a swift impression of rich tapestries and cushions before two children jumped up from one of the benches and came to the door. One of them was the little girl he'd seen yesterday. The other was a boy of his own size, evidently a page. Adam dropped back on the ground again. "Look, Hugh!" cried the little girl in French. "It's the little boy I told you about, the one that stands on his head." So she had seen him before she pulled the curtain. Adam wagged his head a little and grinned. The boy, called Hugh, jumped down beside him. He was a proud-looking boy with curly yellow hair and blue eyes like bits of glass and a thin nose that seemed to be pulling his short lip up over his front teeth. He was wearing a sky blue surcoat with wide sleeves edged with fur. He and Adam looked at each other, and neither one liked what he saw. "He's got a red spaniel that walks on his hind legs," said the girl. "It's a darling dog." She looked, Adam thought, too beautiful and high-born for words, standing there in her scarlet gown with the breeze stirring her curls and her brown eyes shining. Adam's heart softened and spread like butter in the sun. "Oh, I saw the dog," said Hugh loftily. "It's a good enough dog for a common tumbler, but nothing to any one of a dozen dogs we have at home." If he had said Nick was nothing to his own special dog, Adam would have understood and forgiven him. But to say Nick was nothing to a dozen assorted dogs, well, that was too much. Adam thought longingly of wrestling with Hugh, of rolling him over in the mud, mussing up his pretty blue surcoat. But he'd been too well trained by Roger to attempt anything of that kind. Minstrels did not fight with their audiences. He turned to the girl instead and grinned. "It's easy enough," he said, also in French, "to boast about dogs that aren't here to be seen." It occurred to him that Hugh had also said something uncomplimentary about him. He took that up next. "As for me," he said with dignity, "I am not a tumbler. I am Roger the minstrel's son." The girl gave him a friendly smile. "Oh, I like Roger. Where's your dog now, Roger the minstrel's son?" "He's at Dame Malkin's. I was just going to get him. My name is Adam." "Well, you better get going," said Hugh sulkily. It was good advice, but Adam was of no mind to take it from Hugh. He pretended not to hear it. "That's the best carriage I've ever seen," he said to the girl. She made a little face. "You wouldn't think so if you had to ride in it. It bumps and jolts so that we're all bruised from being banged about from one side to the other. Father thinks it's wonderful, but I notice he never rides in it himself." Hugh got into the carriage again, tried to pull her away from the door. "Come, Marjorie, don't talk so much." "Well," said Adam, "I'd better be going." He put on his best son of Roger manner. "Farewell, lady, have a good day," and added impudently to Hugh, "Farewell, Sir Honeycomb." Marjorie, he thought, as he walked briskly away without looking back. Marjorie Delisle, now that was the kind of girl he liked. After stopping at the gatehouse to say goodbye to the porter, he ran down the hill to the river and across the bridge. The morning mist was still rising in the wet lowland, and the St. Mary's lace by the roadside was hung with tiny drops. He found Dame Malkin with her skirts pinned up and wooden clogs on her feet, out feeding her hens, while Nick, forlorn to come nearer lest he frighten the fowls, sat on the doorstep and yawned. Adam sat down beside him, told him about Bayard and how he was to follow close behind, but not close enough to get in the way of the horse's heels. He was quite sure that Nick, though he might not understand every word, grasped the general idea. "Well, I'll miss you both," said Dame Malkin, standing with her hands on her broad hips looking down at them. Adam gave her 2 of his remaining comfits. A poor widow in a village couldn't taste such sweetmeats once in a year, and a silver penny. She gave him a cabbage leaf full of strawberries that she'd found for him. It was easier to say goodbye when you had something to give. Already the first riders of the Delisle train were passing the cottage. "Watch for a dappled gray war horse," said Adam to Dame Malkin. "That will be Bayard." The dame laughed. "How would a minstrel come by a war horse?" she said. "I bet your Bayard's no more than a hobby horse." Adam knew she was teasing him. "You wait and see," he said calmly. By the time he'd finished his strawberries, Roger was there, and Dame Malkin had to admit that Bayard was certainly a war horse. Roger reached down a strong hand to Adam, and Adam scrambled up to his portmanteau perch where he needed to sit. Out on the right, it felt higher and grander than ever. He waved to Dame Malkin, and she threw him a kiss. "Come on, Nick," he called. "Come on, fellow." For the first few minutes, he was so busy getting accustomed to the motion of the horse and hallooing to Nick to come on or come back that he did not notice the road or the other people in it. He missed the last view of the Abbey, riding on its hill beyond the river. He scarcely saw St. Stephen's Church or the roofs of Sopwell Nunnery among the trees. He even forgot about the carriage and Marjorie Delisle and Hugh. The open field passed, and they moved into a forest thick with beech and oak and elm, and fringed at the edges with ferns. "Nick," called Adam, seeing Nick about to dash into the wood. "Here, Nick! Nick, here! I see the abbot hasn't gotten his woods cut back a bow shot from each side of the road yet." "No, Nick, no, leave the rabbit alone," shouted Adam. "But they say," went on Roger, "he keeps a company of armed men guarding this road all the way to London to protect travelers from robbers. Here, Nick, come out of there, Nick." "Adam, stop screeching in my ears. Nick will be all right. Suppose you say nothing at all till I give you leave to speak. Let me hear the jays and the ringdoves instead." Adam clamped his lips firmly together. For a while he kept turning his head and twisting around to watch Nick, but presently he realized that the dog was learning to follow. After his first energy wore off, he stopped making side trips and investigations and trotted steadily along the road, just a little behind Bayard's heels. When they came to a brook, Roger stopped to let both Bayard and Nick drink. He flicked Adam's turned-up nose lightly with his forefinger. "You may talk now," he said. "My faith," said Adam, "look at the road." It stretched ahead of them along a long, level field and up a hill so far away the men and horses looked like chessmen. For the first time since they had started, Adam really knew that he was sitting behind Roger on a great war horse with Nick at his heels and the world before him. The Romans made this road hundreds and hundreds of years ago, said Roger. It will be here hundreds and hundreds of years after we're gone. He turned in the saddle so that he could see the boy's face when he talked. Adam looked away from the road and into Roger's keen, kindly eyes so close to him. A road's a kind of holy thing, Roger went on. That's why it's a good work to keep a road in repair, like giving alms to the poor or tending the sick. It's open to the sun and wind and rain. It brings all kinds of people in all parts of England together, and it's home to a minstrel, even though he may happen to be sleeping in a castle. It was somehow a solemn moment. 4 wild swans flew overhead just then, and made it so that Adam never forgot what Roger had said and how he looked when he'd said it. So that's the end of chapter 4. And chapter 5 is called Going to London. And this is the picture. And it shows Nick running ahead. And it shows Adam and his father Roger on the back of the war horse called Bayard. Wonder what adventure they're going to find on the road to London. Well, we have one little hint, and that is that the abbot has not kept the clearing, the road clear on either side of the road. And that there is a concern that highwaymen or thieves, like carjackers, could be hiding in the brush. But, he said, the abbot is paying extra men to do a security guard along the road. But still, why would the author mention that if they weren't going to be running into some thieves? Well, we'll see. Bye-bye.